Road safety remains a major responsibility for every road user. And one simple action that can actually save lives is the proper use of seat belts and child safety measures in vehicle. And that's why this morning, for our first interview segment, we will be discussing the importance of seat belts and child safety, especially as road accidents continue to claim lives across the country. Joining us this morning is Uchenna Nadika, the Sector Public Education Officer of the Federal Road Safety Corps, Delta State Command, DRC. Uchenna Nadika. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning, Okaga. Good morning to our esteemed viewers, and you're welcome to the program.
Like I said in my intro, road accidents continue to claim lives in Nigeria.
Exactly.
So how effective are seat belts in reducing injuries and deaths during road accidents, and why is it so important? Why is seatbelt so important important for drivers and passengers?
Oh, thank you. Just like you rightly said, crashes, I prefer to use crashes to accidents. Yeah, they claim so much lives. And of course, the importance of seatbelts at any point in time can never be overestimated, because they have a plethora of advantages and importance.
Okay.
First, the ultimate importance of it is to save lives. Second is to also reduce injuries. And the impact in vehicles. It helps to secure major parts of your body, such as the spine, the head, the chest, and all of that. It's for in case of a crash. That is actually the aim of a seatbelt. It might not really stop a crash, but at least it reduces the impact on the occupants of the vehicle. And that's why we always preach about the importance of seatbelt and the need for every occupant of a vehicle to always put on their seatbelt, especially those at the front, because it also helps to restrain the drivers against impact on the dashboard, the windshield, and other elements in the front of the vehicle. And it also helps to, just like I said, reduce the impact on those elements, and also restrain occupants from fleeing off the vehicle in case of a crash. So there are a lot of importance of seatbelts.
Okay, so now you talked about, when we were talking about the importance of seat belts, you said especially for those at the front. Now, we've seen situations where many passengers at the back ignore seat belts. Is it equally important for them to use seat belts?
Yes. It is. Like I said, it is for all occupants of the vehicle. And that is why most of these vehicles actually make provisions. If you enter vehicles, you see that there are provisions for passengers at almost every part of the vehicle to put on their seatbelt. For instance, let's talk about a sedan. That's a saloon vehicle. The saloon vehicle has a seatbelt provision for 3 people at the back. The person at the middle has a provision for the waist.
Why just the waist?
Because of
if the person flexes forward,
actually, the truth is these are safety devices. They are meant, the one at the middle, of course, cannot, it might be difficult for him to have the one covering the shoulder because of he is at the middle. But of course, the one that also holds him at the waist serves almost the same purpose. All of it is just to restrain you in case of that harmful movement, maybe a sudden stop or collision and all of that. You understand? So that's why it helps. If you also check, for instance, buses too, there are some buses that has provision for 2 people at the front. One will have for the seatbelt that will hold from the shoulder to the waist, and the other one will have just the waist. Yes, these are all forms of restraint, you understand, against those sudden and harmful movements.
Okay, when I started talking about seat belts, road safety, I was actually focusing on the driver and the passenger on the front side, because I don't think it's a thing for us Nigerians, those who sit at the back, to use their seat belt.
I do actually.
You do use your seat belt at the back?
If it's a public vehicle, most times, even in a Sienna, especially when I'm traveling, those single seats behind, if it has, I usually put mine on.
That's good, but many Nigerians don't use, especially those that sit at the back, they don't use their seat belt. So my question is, why do you think drivers still ignore the advice that you should use their seat belts despite repeated warnings and sensitizations?
Well, a lot of them, it's not just about seatbelts. A lot of them ignore, a lot of drivers ignore all safety, almost so many safety regulations that are required, you know. And I think most of them want to experience it first. Because
Don't express actually.
You don't think
exactly,
it's an issue of ignorance.
yes, that's ignorance now, but I think the best teacher for them would be maybe when they experience it. Because if you also listen to those who really value the importance of seatbelt, you notice that at one point in time it has helped them. It has really saved them. One person was confessing to me about how seatbelt helped him, and he never expected he was going to come out of that crash, but because he was putting on his seatbelt. So that kind of person, if you tell him tomorrow, remove your, now even he's the one that will be telling other passengers to put on their seatbelt, which is how it is supposed to be. You know, so quite a lot of drivers, yes, and that is why we are also increasing our sensitization and enforcement as well, because seatbelt violation is one of what we call critical offenses, because we believe that if not for anything, every driver and every passenger should be able to put on their seatbelt. You understand? It's a very common, there is no big deal about it. But oftentimes you see drivers feel, okay, because I'm going for a short distance, there's no
Yes,
there's
so
no
I was going to ask you that. So how true is the fact that seatbelts are only necessary when it's a long drive? A short journey, you're like, okay, I'm just turning out of my house, going to get something down the street and return. And it's not even a highway, it's just a street, and speed limit 30 kilometers per hour. Do I really need a seat belt?
Exactly. So that's very untrue. You know, for those who believe such, it's very untrue. The truth is, I always tell people, it's not you that will tell a crash when it will occur. You don't just tell it. You might be careful as a driver, but you're not certain of other drivers too. Do you understand? People tell you that I've driven for 30 years, I'm a very good driver, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, you understand? But at the end of the day, the carelessness of other drivers too might also affect you. So what do you do? That's why we always preach about defensive driving. You as a driver must always be on the defensive. You must always be prepared for the worst case scenario. And where does the preparation start? Before you even enter your vehicle. That's why we always preach about taking care of a vehicle, ensuring vehicle parade and all of those things. But immediately you enter your vehicle, the first thing you're supposed to do is to adjust, make sure that you're comfortable, put on your seat belt
Okay,
before you start your vehicle and start moving. Do you understand? That's what you're supposed to do. No matter the distance you are covering, whether it is short or whether it is a long distance. Because at any point in time, you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario.
All right, you made mention of FRSC sensitizing road users and drivers, and you also talked about enforcement. So what are the penalties for violation of seatbelts, not using your seatbelt? When you see a driver not using his seatbelt, what are the penalties for such an offense?
Well, there are different penalties. Of course, the regulation for almost every penalty, the regulation recommends an option of fine or a 6 months jail term for different degrees. However, there are some, I think we've treated it on this program before. Yeah, so there are some offenses that could also lead to 7 years imprisonment or even more at the discretion of the judge or magistrate, whoever it is that is handling the case. So, such as when you know, dangerous driving, and when maybe someone dies in when you are driving carelessly and all of that. Do you understand? So, however, for seatbelt violation, there, like I said, it could lead to a 6 month jail term, or an option of fine. The fine is 2,000. According to the
It's quite small.
according to the according to the regulation.
Okay.
Yeah, for you it is small,
No, it is
but for the
small,
stress,
because when you
for
look
the
at
stress
the
you go
dangers
through.
involved,
Yes.
because especially for drivers, like the commercial
It's their life
drivers,
now. It's
it's
their
not just their life. What about the
So
life
I was
of-
going to ask about that.
Yes.
So now, first of all, in a situation where, okay, now maybe you see somebody. Let me not use myself. You see somebody, and the person says, "Oh, my seat belt strap, the belt is faulty." What happens then? Let's talk about in a public vehicle. I remember I was in Lagos sometime. I think it was sometime last year, and I was seated at the front. So while we're approaching these guys, the belt was not good though. A guy was just like, just put on like this, just put on like this. And they did not check. As they just saw it like the clip was not effective. I just put it across like this. Nobody checked. That's how we passed. And so in a situation where it's a commercial vehicle and the passenger probably is on his seat belt, then a passenger in the vehicle is defaulting, who pays the fine or who is fined?
Okay. For every vehicle, not just commercial, for every vehicle, we always hold the driver responsible.
Because you're the one who's driving
Yes,
the vehicle.
the driver is the captain of that vehicle. It's just like the pilot. You know, the pilot is the captain of the airplane, and his instructions are ultimate while he's on the flight. That is the same for the driver.
Why use commercial? Private is that, okay, you're traveling with me, I can tell you, I know you, or you're my family member, you're my friend. But commercial, you be driver, okay, they give you your money, not tell me to use seatbelt.
The driver has
So you
the
have
right.
to insist, or you pick on
The
the
driver
person.
has the right to bring any passenger down if the passenger refuses
Okay, now,
to obey.
yeah,
Do you
because of
understand?
time, let's talk about child safety in vehicles. What
Oh,
is
yes.
child safety and why is it so important?
Okay, so you see, this child safety and even seatbelt, they are very, very important issues when it comes to road safety, because oftentimes both drivers, especially parents, you know, they quite neglect the importance of putting their children at the on the safety part, you know, especially when it has to do with the vehicle.
Where's the safety part?
And you know, it's just a general. There is
Okay.
no particular safety side in the vehicle.
Okay.
However, I'm just on a general note, you know. And I always try to use a certain governor in Nigeria who said that this sugar that they put in his mouth, nobody can take away the sugar from him, you know. And it just applies to parents, you know. Oftentimes they neglect the issue of safety, especially on the part of their children, and that's because of ignorance. Maybe they don't even know better, you know. And these kids are a gift to them, and I think it is important that they always, you know, emphasize on the safety of their children at all points. First is you find parents carrying children on their laps driving, which is very, very bad. Even carrying their children in the vehicle is not even appropriate. Do you understand? There is what we call a child restraint seat. It is meant to be affixed at the back side of the vehicle, you know, properly. And then it also, you can now use the seat belt from the backside for the children, especially for kids below the ages of 7, from 7 below. You know, they are meant to sit just as it is on the screen. Do you understand? Yes. So, but you see parents, oftentimes because maybe their kids are crying and all of those things, you see them make mistakes of carrying their kids. Some people carry their kids while they are even driving on the steering. Some people carry their kids in front, at the passenger side in front, you know, and all of those things. It's quite bad, you know, it's very unsafe. One, in the case of a crash, you know, you find out that your weight might also overburden the child, and it could lead to more severity in terms of injuries, you know. And of course, you know that these kids are also developing. Their bones are not yet strong, you know, to withstand some certain level of impact, you know, in case of an accident. That's why this child restraint seat is built, you know, to be able to accommodate children.
Okay.
Do you understand? That's quite. And then you also find situations where parents oftentimes leave their children in the vehicle, they wind up and just forget their children in the vehicle and then go to do one or two things, you know, outside. And it's quite bad. We've had a situation where at a certain point, I think at one of the hospitals, you know, and the kids were inside, and all of a sudden we noticed that the vehicle was moving and there was no adult in
Wow.
in the vehicle. So the kids, you know, of course they are watching you, they know how you are operating
Especially if it's push to start and
of course the parents wound up and put on the AC for them. You understand? So the vehicle was already on. You know, so what they just did was to just put the gear on reverse, and before you know it, the vehicle. If not for people who rushed immediately, because they noticed that there was no adult in the vehicle, so they had to go and immediately stop
Now,
the vehicle.
because of time, you talked about the child restraint seats. Now,
Yes.
at what age should children stop using these? And could you explain the different child restraint systems parents should use for infants, toddlers, and older children? Because we also know the feature of the child lock, so
Yes.
and all of that. So, can you just break it down? What age should can kids now start actually using the actual seat of the cars, and what other restraint methods can be
Okay,
applied?
so there are about, I think, 3 types of the child restraint seat. There is a rear facing, there is a front facing,
Okay.
So, but they are all attached behind the vehicle. So the rear facing just means that you are not facing the front of the vehicle. So you are facing the child. It's for infants actually. So they are facing the seat.
The backrest.
Yes, they are facing the seat. So that's for infants. Then for the front facing, for just children below, maybe from 3 to 4, 5, they are supposed to be using that. They can face the road. Let me
Yes.
just put it that way. They can face the road, just as you are seeing it here. They can face the road. Is a child restraint seat, and then we also have the normal booster seats. They are there. However, for kids from the ages of 7 and below, they are meant to use the child restraint seat. For kids between 7 and 12, kids between 7 to 12, they can sit just on their own behind the vehicle, and put on the seatbelt. However, from 12, from 12 and above can actually sit in front of the vehicle, putting on the seatbelt. That's how it is.
Okay, that's much we can take. Thank you so much, DRC Uchenna
Thank you
Nnadika.
very
Thank you
much.
for joining us this morning. We're talking about seat belts and child safety measures. Now, seat belts and child safety measures may look very simple, but they can make a big difference between life and death during road crashes. I would use your word, road crashes or road accidents. So make sure you always put on your seat belt and you observe the child safety measures when you're driving with your children in the car. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, dear.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And that's
you
very
where
much.
we will take our final pause on this segment. We'll go on a break, and when we come back, we will have another interview segment here on Morning Ride. So please stay with us.